Is Britain one of the most overtaxed countries in the world?
Of course.
Council, national insurance, income, capital gains, and inheritance tax.
And more.
Let me know in the comments if I've missed any other taxes,
VAT.
and make sure you're following along to find out the tools I'm using to pay less tax, because at this point, just existing in Britain feels taxable. I know I'm not alone in feeling like, why should I pay council tax when the roads are covered in potholes, youth centres have disappeared, and my bins regularly don't get collected?
And they charge
Then
for
there's income tax. Salaries rise with inflation, but frozen tax thresholds mean that people end up paying more tax without becoming genuinely better off. And that's before we even discuss national insurance tax, which most of us pay throughout our working lives to build entitlement to a state pension. But there's no guarantee that today's pension age, rules, or value will be the same when it's time for us to retire.
Right.
And God forbid you work hard, invest, and actually manage to get ahead. Then they introduce you to capital gains tax. And when you die, inheritance tax, because apparently taxing the money when you earned it, spent it, and invested it wasn't quite enough. They also want to share before your children can benefit from what you spent your life building. Great Britain, the country where they encourage you to work hard, then tax you at every stage of the journey.
You see, this is so beautiful because this is like an advert, and I was smiling from before the video even started because I was thinking to myself, the UK tax system is a scam. I have often said a scam is someone who's still confused about money. And do I believe that the UK tax system keeps people still confused about money? Well, you let me know in the comments below what you think my views are on that. The reality is, when you think about the myriad of taxes that were shared through this video by the creator, the reality is the UK is a cooked system. Now, the question is why? Because I think a lot of the time what we do is we look at something we don't like, we look at something that's negative in our perception, and we just complain a lot of the time, or we just make other people aware of what's wrong, rather than actually breaking down why the system works the way it does. And I think if you look back historically, it will start to make a whole bunch of sense. The United Kingdom has had control over multiple nations across the globe for multiple years. Whilst it had that control of all of these nations, what did it do? It extracted. The strategy of the UK to generate revenue is to extract from its colonies. So the question is, what do you expect it to do when on paper it no longer has any colonies? Well, it's now going to extract from its individuals, okay, or companies, which are still the new version of colonies. And in my opinion, that's the reason why the structure is the way it is, because extraction in the UK is the name of the game. And if you go and look at other places, okay, other countries, other nations, other people from different nationalities, you'll very quickly find that extraction is becoming the new game that these other landscapes, these other communities are playing also. But the question again is why? Why are these other nations also falling in line and doing the same thing that they're seeing happen in the UK? I submit to you that the reason it's happening in these other nations is because these other nations are seeing nations like the United Kingdom do this and, in simple terms, get away with it. Nobody complain about it. Nobody do anything about it. And the worst case scenario of what we've seen so far is not a revolt in these first world nations, but what we see is an exodus. We see people who have the wealth just say, I'm getting out of here for myself. So the real question is, why? Why is this happening? And secondarily, why are other nations also following suit? Now, the reason it's important to understand why other nations are falling in suit or following suit is because if you are someone who says to yourself, well, I'm going to just move, I'm just going to get out of here, you have to be mindful that you may be getting out of here and going to somewhere else, that does the exact same thing. And the reality is you wouldn't obviously up and leave if you're going to go somewhere else just to be deceived, right? You want to go somewhere else, if you're going to go somewhere else where you know it's greener on the other side with that grass, right? So these are some of the challenges that we have to think through. Okay, if the UK system is exuberant in its tax, if it's taxing left, right, up, down, when you sleep, when you're awake, when you die, when you live, right? If the tax is coming from every angle, the question is, well, what do you do about it? Okay, because we've answered the first question about why. Why is it like this? Well, if this is a system that's extracted historically in order to generate its revenue, what do we expect it to do going forward? Okay, so going forward, if extraction is in its bloodline, if extraction is in its system, if extraction is in its DNA, then what are you going to do in order to play? Are you going to do the same thing? Are you going to be an extractor of your brethren, right? Or are you going to be someone who says, you know what, there's a different formula, there's a different framework, there's a different field that I can walk into in order for this to work for you. And this is what basically I discovered, I guess I'd say, at the age of 18, when I realized that what I was doing was not working. Okay. Now, obviously what I was doing was not working because at the time, as a child, I was effectively committing crime. Okay. And obviously I was sent to prison, had to serve time in order to rectify the wrong, right? But having been released, my whole mindset was, well, what do I do now? Okay. And let me take you a bit behind the curtain, which I don't usually do in these videos, but I think it will be very helpful, right? So now as an adult, I've looked back and psychoanalyzed why I did a lot of what I did as a child, right? Because it's important to me, because I'm a dad now. I have children. I don't want my children to make the same mistakes I made. So I thought about, well, what was going on in my head, right? And it was very simple and easy for me to analyze what was going on in my head because I was there the whole time, right? So here's a few things that I realized. My parents separated when I was 6 years old. Fast forward after that, I am 11 years old and my mum's made redundant. Okay. The whole time, my dad owns his own business. He works for himself, right? So at the age of 11, a few things were going on for young man Samuel, ICanWin, right? So what are those few things? I'm going to give you all of the variables. The first thing is my mum and dad separated, right? So I realized whatever they were doing is not the key to keep a successful relationship, all right? Whatever they were doing, whatever that was, right? I don't know what it was because I wasn't in their relationship, but as an observer, whatever I observed, etc., right? Let's go to the second layer because this is where it gets more important. At the age of 11, my mum got made redundant after working for a particular bank in central London for 15 years. Okay, for 15 years. So I want you to rationalize this with me, right? So I'm 11 years old and I've got internal questions I'm asking myself. One of those questions is, Samuel, how are you going to do what you need to do for your future to come through? Okay. And my parents told me the blueprint they gave me. They said, well, we came to this country so you can get educated. So get education, right? We're here for you to get the education, for you to be able to better yourself, have a better future, etc., opportunity, and so forth and so forth. So now let's think about this, right? So I'm here to get an education, but the purpose of getting the education is to get a job. And if I get a job, I'm supposed to get a job that I can stay for as long as possible, get paid as much as possible, and take care of my family, right? But at the age of 11, I witnessed my mum, who's got a job, who's worked it for 15 years, get made redundant. So again, I didn't realize this as a child. I didn't realize this as an 11-year-old. But what I did realize is I couldn't help my mum. I realized there was nothing I could do for my mum. But what I didn't realize was going on subconsciously was I was asking myself subconscious questions such as, is it still worth going to school, getting the degrees so I can get a job, so after some years, I can be the person who's being made redundant? That was the subconscious covert question I was being asked by myself in my head. And my answer to that was, no, it's not worth it. So guess what I did? I decided to become wayward. That's in a nutshell what happened to me. You know, people can have all of these different rhetoric. Oh no, you know, the young people, they just commit crime because they're criminals. No, it's got nothing to do with that 9 times out of 10. It's got to do a lot of the time with the complex questions they're answering from their framework, their landscape of life that you never get to ask or answer because you're not going through that landscape at that time. And here's the thing that's super interesting about this. 9 times out of 10, we're actually providing the fuel for them to have those thoughts, but we don't even realize it because we are working through the situation which is fueling those thoughts for them ourselves. My mum at that time would have been devastated and working through her redundancy. She wouldn't be thinking my 11-year-old is now going to have no hope in the job market because I've worked for 15 years for one single employer and they've just turned around and axed my job, right? She's not going to be thinking that. I couldn't expect her to think that now as an adult, but as a child, this was what was running through my mind. Now, again, this is not my attempt to say, oh, it's my mom's fault that I started committing crime. Nothing of the sort, right? I made my decisions even though I was a child. But I understand now as an adult what those decisions were based on, what they were founded on, what were the central tenets producing those thoughts, because I now have an understanding of how life works a little bit better than I did then. So when we ask this question about what's happening with the taxes, when we ask this question about why things are so difficult, when we ask this question, why does it feel like even just to breathe, you got to pay a tax? The reality is you have to understand how the landscape, the big picture works, the macroeconomics, and then you have to have an understanding of the microeconomics, the small picture as it pertains to you and your family, your legacy, and your next generation. And when you do that, guess what happens? The game just becomes a lot easier because you start realizing, hold on a minute, okay, there's been extraction from day one. This is how this system gets things done. I'm not in the business of extraction. I don't want to start extracting from people. I've extracted before. If you haven't, then, you know, I just don't want to extract anymore, whatever your story is. And then you start creating your new plan of action. The real question is, what's your plan of action going to be? Are you just going to do what everyone else does and expect some different results to what everyone else gets? Or are you going to say to yourself, you know what, if it's going to be, it's going to be up to me. And as a result, I have to do something differently to all the other things that I've seen. Now, look, I'm not here to say don't go to university. I'm not here to say don't get a job. I'm not here to say don't work faithfully for an employer for a long period of time. I am definitely not here to say any of those things. But I am here to say, take a minute and think about the actual true future outcomes you desire. And then take an extended minute and think about the actual true future outcomes you desire for your children. And then, if you're brave enough, if you're bold enough, if you're big enough, take an extended new minute and think about the outcomes and results you desire for your children's children. Because the Bible says a good man leaves an inheritance for their children's children. And if you can think that far ahead, if you can think to the second generation after yourself, ask yourself, what do you think they need in order to have optimal health, in order for them to have optimal wealth, and in order for them to be able to live at a level that is substantially viable for their self? And if you ask those questions for yourself, here's what's going to happen. Yes, the UK is still going to have a crazy tax system. And yes, you might be living through that system right now, but ultimately you're going to figure it out. You're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to have to put up with this way. I'm going to do something else, whether it's a side hustle, whether it's a new business, whether it's investing in property, whether it's figuring things out in terms of stocks and shares. You are going to win. Guess why? Because you have a plan. And as they often say, it's failing to plan, which is planning to fail. So if you don't fail to plan, guess what? You don't have to plan to fail. This is Samuel ICanWin. I'm signing out. I pray you got value from this video. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts were. And if you haven't already, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on another video. As you remember that small keys open up big doors. Good day. God bless. Let's go.
Small keys open big doors.